An error occurred. Okay, so it's working here. All right, we'll probably get started in a couple more minutes here. Probably give it one more minute and then we'll get started.
I'm gonna go out there just to make sure the volume's working.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started just about now. So today we'll be talking about our grant program. It's our $1 million annual program. And this piece that we'll be talking about today is the ecosystem building grants, which is $500,000 of that $1 million. And we'll talk more about what that is about here. So just very quickly, we'll be talking about the background of this program, kind of where it came from, the program structure, the process, the application form, and then we'll get into any questions that you have. Going back here at the bottom of the window, you'll see where you can submit questions. It's a Google form, So if you have any questions while I'm talking, feel free to put them in there. I'll check them later on and we'll go through them. I also have a couple of frequently asked questions if no questions get asked during this presentation. So feel free to ask away. So some background on the program. In June 2016, the Innovation and Growth Fund policy guidelines and criteria were established by the City Council. And like I said earlier, that was one that included a grant program that had $1 million in annual funding to invest in startups and ecosystem builders in Sacramento. Overall, this fund was established with $10 million. That was to grow kind of our innovation ecosystem. So the guiding principles of this grant program are to catalyze innovation in the startup community and prepare Sacramento for the industries of the future. So the way we see that going, we've seen that going historically with this grant program is through supporting what is called startup enablers. We'll talk a little bit more on that coming up. So kind of the motivating problems behind this Innovation and Growth Fund, as well as this Innovation Grant Program, were the four kind of key things. Number one, that there were too few opportunities in the area for startups to grow. There was too little venture capital investment in those startups. There's too little interest from big companies to come to Sacramento, and there was too much reliance on existing industries. And when you see existing industries, think about the major employers in the area, namely government, and healthcare is great, but they're also one that we rely on for many jobs in the region. So with that in mind, this Innovation and Growth Fund was formed, and this grant program was formed to be able to encourage individuals to get into entrepreneurship and in these innovation and tech fields. So to date, this program, which was previously known as RAILS, you may have known it as RAILS, has funded 2 cohorts with 26 organizations. Those have been made up of accelerator programs, maker spaces, incubator programs, mentorship organizations, talent acquisition organizations, which is a fancy way of saying kind of those leadership and training organizations, and marketing organizations. And these 2 cohorts, the awards given out totaled almost $2 million in grants. Came out to, I think, about 1.9-ish million, but just about $2 million in grants. So you may have noticed, if you're somewhat familiar with the Rails Grant Program, that we've changed the name to the SUTL Innovation Grant Program. And you may be asking, what is SUTL? And so for us, it's this framework. It stands for the Sacramento Urban Technology Lab. And it's this framework that we use when we're thinking about how do we make Sacramento into a living lab. So the idea behind this is that government, industry, and academia are working together to kind of build a place where technologies can be developed and scaled and real life problems can be solved by these entrepreneurs. So within the Sacramento Urban Technology Lab framework, we've identified 7 industry verticals that Sacramento is either doing well at or represent industry verticals that are going to be key in the future. So from these 7 verticals, and they're not all listed here, but you can check out our website to learn more about those verticals. And I believe they're also in the guidelines. But from those key verticals, we've identified 3 for this round of funding that will be the focus for the next 3 grant cycles. And I didn't add it in here, but as a kind of point of reference, 1 grant cycle is 12 months. So I hesitate to say a year because this program contracts won't be kicking off on January 1st, but you can think of this as a 12-month program. A grant cycle is 12 months. And so for the next 3 annual grant cycles, so we're hoping it's 2020, 2021, and 2022, the focus will be on these 3 industry verticals. So that's the Internet of Things, which you can think of as connected devices, and cybersecurity, mobility, health IT, and life sciences. So we've made a few other changes besides just the name change for this new program. This particular offering, the Ecosystem Building Grants, is $500,000, but the whole amount of funding for this SUTL Innovation Grant Program will be still $1 million. So this first piece, the Ecosystem Building Grants, is about building workforce pipelines to specific industries for startups and individuals in Sacramento. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. The other 2 pieces, which aren't out yet, which we're still fleshing out some of, will be an ecosystem marketing, which will likely be 2 RFPs and co-working marketing grants. And a third piece, which is a startup growth competition, which, again, not all the details fleshed out yet, but you'll look for that likely at the beginning of next year. So overall, our objectives for this ecosystem, well, for the entire SUTL Innovation Grant Program are these here. I guess I can read through them, why not? Which are to expand the reach of entrepreneurial support organizations, increase opportunities for startups to grow, increase the number and viability of startups, increase VC investment in Sacramento, marketing broadly to change the perception of the ecosystem, foster and facilitate high-growth startups, encourage targeted collaborations, and build key industry verticals. And so these objectives came from kind of our internal evaluation, as well as just some of the outcomes and goals we've seen through the past 2 cohorts of the grant program. And so this round, if you've paid attention to Rails before and you've never seen these objectives, this round we've pulled these out specifically and kind of called them out for ourselves and for you to understand what we're trying to achieve with this $1 million. So the Innovation and Growth Fund that I mentioned earlier, that this $1 million comes from, has specific objectives that we have to meet for the funding that we use from it. And so these are to either create jobs, make it easier to conduct business, I believe that's with the city of Sacramento, leverage funds with other private or public funds, increase revenue to the city, accelerate growth. So that's kind of defined as promoting formation and growth of businesses. Or number 6, encourage diversity and inclusion in the innovation community. And these are things we still kind of use as guiding principles. So for this particular piece of the overall innovation grant program, the ecosystem building grants, I'll get a little bit more into what we are looking for. So this piece of the program most resembles what Rails has been up to this point. So, but with a few key differences. So we're offering this time grants. There are no grant categories. So in the past, there were 3 different grant categories with different minimums and maximums that you could apply for. This year, there's no minimum, and you can apply for up to $100,000. So that's kind of to encourage you to really take a look at your budget and to understand what your program will cost ultimately. We're hoping that being a little lenient will get some critical thought into that instead of people asking for the minimum or maximum just based on what grant category they fit into. So the objective of this program is building workforce pipelines to the IoT, cybersecurity, mobility, health, IT, and life science industries. So what that looks like is training programs, co-working spaces, accelerators, incubators, maker spaces, that's the other one, that are supporting individuals who are either trying to build their skills so they can be in those industries, or trying to become entrepreneurs within those industries. So the part of the idea behind that is similar to the kind of founding principles of Rails is we want to support entrepreneurs and businesses through the whole pipeline. So when you have a trained workforce ready to go into those fields, you have support for the entrepreneurs who need talent. You have programs that those entrepreneurs can go into to build their skills and refine their business ideas and make sure they have viable companies, and then they have spaces to work in and the things that they need to be successful. So with that in mind, some of the potential activities that we see funding are physical space, if your project is about finding a space for your program, if you need staffing for your program, if you want to market or do market research for your program, if you need to develop curriculum, if you need to, hire staff or purchase equipment for a training program. Those are the types of things that we see potentially funding through this grant program. So this grant is not all about training programs, but there are a few things that we wanted to call out specifically for training programs to kind of ensure the quality of what is being offered to participants. We would like that if you're offering a training program for entrepreneurs, that you work with an employer, either formally or informally, to create a pathway to jobs or internships, or provide entrepreneurial skill development. So if you're training individuals to go into the workforce, we'd like you to partner with an employer who would be interested in hiring some people who are trained with the skills you're offering. Or if you're supporting entrepreneurs, that's all right for training programs as well. If the program is for primarily youth, let me go backwards. If the program is primarily serving youth, we would like that to be explicitly connected to jobs or internships, or provide an accredited certificate, badge, or certification. And what that's for is to make sure that the students who go through your program are able to come out at the other end and with something. If it's with a job, if it's with a certificate, we want to make sure that the youth are able to take that and use that to get a foot in the door. And so some of that has to do with just the range that you get of different programming that's offered. There isn't a lot of standardization. If I do a coding class, it could be, I could be learning Hello World, or I could be programming robots. So it's in the best interest of your participants, for us, if they are able to take something tangible out at the other end. And this also kind of goes along with some of our youth programming priorities, is to be able to ensure the quality of the programming we're offering to our youth. So, one of the things we would definitely like to see as a part of your application is your goals and metrics. And you'll see this in some of the questions that are asked, but we do want to know what you expect as an outcome of your program and what metrics you're going to look for to determine whether your program is successful or not. So, that'll obviously depend on a few different things and your priorities as an organization, but we would definitely like to know those things. We'd also like to see the connection between those goals of your program and the activities that you express that you will be doing. So if you are doing an incubator program and you would like to support 5 entrepreneurs, how many workshops will that be for them? How will you be finding them, etc. We'd also like, as a part of the application, some milestones and benchmarks that you are kind of looking to be hitting. They can be a little bit open and be refined as the program gets started. So as a heads up, we'll ask about these in quarterly reports. We ask our grantees to submit quarterly reports. So these will be the things that we track throughout the process is, progress towards goals, progress towards milestones, and we'll be looking at how successful your program was as based on how successful you have or how you've defined success. So hitting those goals, achieving those metrics, and those milestones. So we'll get into the application process. So on the left, you will see eligible organizations. Organizations may be a little bit vague here. So it may be more accurate to say eligible projects. So if you're funding, co-working space, accelerator, incubator, makerspace, community-based organization, private company, or sole proprietor, you can apply. Where we are a little bit more specific, I guess, is the ineligible organizations. Previously, we said that public agencies cannot apply, and we've also specifically called out here chambers of commerce, schools, so that's K through 12, that's universities as well, the organizations that run PBIDs, as well as Mayor's Tech Council organizations. So for all but the Mayor's Tech Council organizations, the reasoning behind that is to make sure that we know that there are other sources of funding for those particular organizations. That doesn't mean you can't partner with them. In fact, many of those organizations are great partners and would really add to the credibility of your projects. So we wholeheartedly encourage working with those organizations. But as the primary applicant for the grant program, we will not be accepting applications from those organizations. And then the Mayor's Tech Council organizations are on there because we use the Mayor's Tech Council members as judges and scorers for the grant program, and that is simply to remove any conflicts of interest, or perceived conflicts of interest. So, the minimum eligibility for your project. We have kind of 3 things here. First of all, projects must be located in the city of Sacramento. I will likely get I've already gotten a couple questions, but we'll probably get more about projects being located in the city. Your organization can be located outside of the city, but as long as your activities for the grant program are within the city limits, they will be eligible. We've had a question about being located in the city, but having activities outside of the city. The objective kind of these funds is to be able to support residents of the city primarily. So that's kind of the reasoning behind that. If you've been a previous Rails grantee or even a previous grantee of any other city department, you are eligible for funding. There are questions in the application about funding you've received from the city in the past 3 years, but we have no restrictions on who can apply for this grant program. So with that being said, you must be compliant with current or past city grants. So we will be checking with other departments who have given your organization money or may be giving your organization money, and we'll be checking on your compliance to make sure that we can proceed. And that's, I believe, that is a legal thing, that the compliance with city grants. Yes, maybe. Yes. All right, so timeline. The application will be due at 3 p.m. on November 25th. So November 25th is a Monday. So all the last minute folks, which is probably going to be a good 60% of you who are working on it over the weekend, can, if there are technical difficulties, will be available as the deadline approaches and hits. We'll be accepting questions, and I'll show you where, up until November 18th at 11:30 p.m., so right before midnight. Those we'll still likely answer them after that, but the form, I believe, will cut you off at that time. So if you submit a question at 11:28 on November 18th and you don't see an answer right away, it's likely because I am at home and asleep, but you will still likely see an answer to your question before the deadline. So with that being said, the application will close November 25th, and we'll begin the pre-screening process, which I'll talk about shortly. That'll be complete by December 6th, and then we should, crossing fingers, have all of our scoring and judging done by January 13th. Then that week, we plan to notify the awardees. And this process is a little different than our last round of Rails. If you were following Rails last round, where we had a pitch day, there's no pitch day, there's no pitching. So we're going to try that out. But there is a possibility that we may ask applicants to come in for interviews or questions if there are more questions from our judges, our reviewers, during the scoring period. So expected dates, we expect with that timeline that we'll take the contracts to council for approval, contracts and awardees to council for approval on February 4th. The reason that is such a tentative date is we don't get the next year's council schedule until later in the year, so still not quite sure what the dates of council meetings will be, but that is when we anticipate taking it to council. And with that in mind, we anticipate beginning the projects in mid-February. So going back to the grant cycle being a 12-month cycle, 12-month kind of period, anticipate beginning your project mid-February, I'd say after February 17th, and think about your project as a 12-month period, so from mid to late February of 2020, ending mid to late February in 2021. So, on our application site, which is Screen Door, which we'll also take a look at here in a minute, we have two big things that we'd like from you. The first is for you to fill out all of the questions in the application form. Tried to make it short, and then it did not end up as short as I wanted it to be. But I think that it'll give you a good opportunity to really give us an idea of what your project will entail. And then the other thing we'd like from you is your project budget, which will outline how those grant funds will be used. We don't want to know the entire project budget, so we just want to know how the grant funds, an outline of how the grant funds will be spent. So we'll take a look at the budget outline or budget template as well. Okay. So the selection process, we're anticipating looking like this. The first piece, which will wrap up hopefully December 6th, will be a review by city staff for minimum criteria. And we'll talk about the minimum criteria here in a minute. No promises, but if we go through proposals and see that we need additional information, we may reach out and ask. Again, no promises. It's not a high likelihood, but it's something we may do. Following that review for minimum criteria, the Mayor's Tech Council will review and score the eligible applications using the scoring criteria. And like I mentioned before, we may ask applicants to provide additional information via interview. So if the Mayor's Tech Council would like to ask questions of finalists or top applications, that's something that they may elect to do. The Mayor's Tech Council, following that scoring, will conduct a final review to nominate top projects and recommend preliminary awards and amounts. And those will go, it says, to the city manager and council, but really those will go to the city council for approval, and they will amend or adopt those awards and award amounts. So I don't believe I mentioned it, but during the city count or the Mayor's Tech Council review, they may also recommend a different award amount. So they may want to get one more in and need to request a different amount to be able to fit in another, or they may think a project maybe could do with less funding. Both grant cohorts, we've seen two different kind of mindsets. One round, the reviewers kind of played with the numbers. The second round, they left them completely alone. So, there's no promises on the requested amount being the final amount for your grant. So just keep that in mind as you apply and kind of look for the viability of the program you have. So the pre-screening criteria that city staff will use when going through the applications preliminarily will be kind of these 6 things. Those are a proven track record, and there is a question to ask about that, so you can describe some of the things that you've done in the past that will make you let us know that you will be able to execute this project. Clear, actionable plans that achieve program objectives, fills an industry gap or local market need. City funds would be catalytic to project implementation. Having stated realistic program deliverables and metrics, and the complete list of an application. I think that one may be the biggest no-brainer. We need all the questions. So here's kind of the criteria that the judges will be using to score, and you can look at a breakdown. Oh no! You can look at a breakdown. One second, I may not. Oh no. Okay, hold on. Having some technical issues with the slides.